And then. Do you remember again that Teresa was going to make a comment? I can't remember if she was like, but she was leaving from your like.
Yeah, I thought it was down.
And I thought. If the shooter decides to get her phone, she's coming, if she's not, you know, she's not looking. Rally on, and then.
Commissioners Bickerton, and
That's our new.
But you mentioned her herself.
oh, she did.
Yeah.
You did.
And so is she going?
Rachael.
I have not heard from Commissioner Herbert.
No, there's all guys, 6 of us, right, Starr? Start launch, right? Speak now for a lot of weeks. You're not here to get that, right? Don't say anything in the meeting. So Jenna, what do you want to do?
Mayor, if you wouldn't mind just opening the meeting.
Okay.
Um,
I don't know if it's certified.
no, I don't believe so.
Right. So I'm gonna open up a meeting for a joint session between Garden City Council and Garden City Planning and Zoning in here on Wednesday, June 17th. With the agenda, talk about the parent and SAP. So with that.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for your willingness to have this joint work session tonight. And I can come over to the table if that would be helpful. I'm over here mostly to be close to.
You're not managing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And let's.
Oh, there she is. The great spot for you here. Oh, bye. It's the boss. Timing is perfect.
Yeah. So on. Switch pages. I can just stand on it.
She.
But that was not being shared with the
Well, not real, that's just she had. Well, I don't know, we were confused about this.
Okay.
Okay. I would say you can take Teresa's spot. So first of all, does everybody know? You've been on, let's see, okay, I'm the new person on the PNC and appointed by the people around this table, so obviously you know me, and so Councilmember Carver, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm Wendy Carver-Herbert. I'm new coffee bird, so there's Spencer to it.
Kent Rasmussen, I can't call myself a big. But anyway, I'm third year.
And Kent was previously
Yes, it is.
the chair of PNC, so he has PNC experience. Right. And then James, he had, we're hoping he used scrolls and he had a working late, so he never went up here and we met him. In the process, he was also on planning zone prior to becoming council member. So with that, you want me to continue, or do you want to say something?
Up to you.
Well, so I'll start, and then, so what we really want to do is have a joint session so we can kind of get all somewhat on the same page regarding the Heritage Common SAP. And really, from my perspective, it's the SAP has the potential to really be changing for our city. And it really gives us an opportunity to do it right. Could be, you know, I think you could change that whole area and change the development of the city as I think they're moving forward. It's not how I look at it. We want to make sure that it meets the needs of the city in terms of density and what the city to look like. we want to make sure, because the city has goals that it wants to meet in terms of sustainability model financially. Right, we also want to have an environment, that I think is extra that part of town, that we create a really good growth for the city. And, allow that to be really the keystone of that. I think, from my perspective, having talked to lots of people, is we don't want to be prescriptive on mandating that they do this, but really, you know, it comes to that, probably spend close to $100 million on doing it with professional developers, and they this is what they do for a living. And so we want to really, in my opinion, this will be open for discussion, is to have kind of design skills and things like this. But otherwise, don't be restricted and leave it up to professionals to kind of figure out how to meet those design goals that we want to make in the master plan. And the other thing I think is really important is that we don't look at this in terms of today, item 2026, 2027, or 2028. This is a project that's going to be around for 100 years when it's built. And so what is the city going to look like 3 years or 4 years? What's transportation going to look like 20, 30, 40 years? What's the work going to be like 20, 30, 40 years? What's party needs going to be in 20 years, 20, 30 years? It'd be different than what it is today. And obviously, we can never get that as we go on the crystal ball. But we kind of follow the trends, right, of what's happening with work, what's happening with parking, not an argument that this population continues to grow in the Treasure Valley, which is at being close to 850,000 now in the Treasure Valley. We expect that to grow to 1 point whatever by 2032 or 3 based on kind of campuses. Once we get to the density, imagine public transportation will go for, right? And then because we get that density, so I think in 20 or 30 years, what will public transportation be like? I think we take that all the way, we try to create creativity. The word I use is we have an opportunity, on P&Z and the city council to bring in an epic development from here in Scotland. And so, Jenna has put together some options in the development A, which is pretty restricted. To look all up to the C, which is she'll talk about that, and we back get that's kind of what we'd like to go to the city, because it's not anything, not just speaking, it's not principles. So that's my 2 cents of mayor, of what I see the city kind of looking at going, which is really good for the cabs. Just where the development city, west of the east of one. Like you said, and then so for this meeting, I'm going to hand it over to Jenna and kind of let her steer the discussion, be for lack of better word, the moderator of the meeting, and then just engage the discussion. She can steer that. We need to let somebody else say this. So anyway, so with that,
Thank you, Mayor. Great introduction, and much of what you said, I might have very similar written to say, but first of all, thank you. I know it's outside of the regular scheduled meetings that you have, but I do believe that this joint work session will be very valuable. And then just before we start, a little bit of business, we do have a regularly scheduled planning and zoning commission meeting at 6:30. That meeting, all of our public hearings ended up wanting to go to continuance to another date. So if we do run long, we can either pause this if there's a public here that wishes to watch out for about 5 minutes and run through that agenda and turn it over to Ryan. Or if there's no public here that's interested in the regularly scheduled meeting, I believe there's no harm in just starting that a little bit later. As the mayor noted, there's been great discussion regarding this ordinance, where we've heard individuals call the potential for this ordinance to create a legacy for Garden City. And as the mayor also noted, hopefully we're looking at this, ordinance not as what it could be in the next couple of years, but what is it going to look like indefinitely, as it will create phones for generations to come in that part of town. And not only will it affect the neighborhood, but it will affect long-term viability of the city as well. And with that, I was going to jump into the vision. The vision is very similar to what you've seen previously, the PNC through the initial hearing that's been continued in city council for a brief introduction work session. The first point is the green belt. The public has been very clear that they hope that the green belt is augmented. I think not only just protected, but augmented for the public's enjoyment, as well as addressing the Boise rivers and immunity. The initial proposal took the comp plan's required open space park and directed that it be adjacent to the green belt. This version C does not do that. What it does do is it still requires public access at 300 feet, so every 300 feet. So there would be one additional public access, or more, should somebody want to permit more. And then from 30 foot of the center line of the green belt, so give or take a 20-foot setback. Similar publicly accessible area has been defined through height limitations of 2 feet and then further stepped back. Not 2 feet, 2 stories. Thank you. Be a very small development. And then a 5,000 square foot footprint, and then 60% of the property being publicly accessible, meaning that there's a definition in the draft, meaning that the public can enter in and out of that space. Maybe it's a coffee shop, maybe it's a park, maybe it's whatever, but not a single family or a resident on the bottom floor. The reason that staff is suggesting that is my 20-year tenure here. There have been a number of times where perhaps the first level of people adjacent to the green belt don't mind that they're living next to a public amenity, but then somebody new moves in, wants to shut down access, wants to privatize. And so restricting that to more publicly accessible uses, something the staff is suggesting. And then that brings us to the open space park. Up here, it's on page 13 of the staff report that you received for today, are ideas of how park space may be actually more meaningful than if you have a big swath of grass adjacent to the green belt, which can feel a little uninviting sometimes, or it just can become a dog run of how somebody could take and better utilize that really high value property to make their development work, but really still provide meaningful park spaces, either through mid or small parks that are dispersed, or they could do line break park under this proposal. And then should be one just move to page 9 of the staff report. It looks like it's page 3 right there, but it's actually 13.
Page 9.
Yeah, it's all messed up, so it's the other way.
Oh. This one?
Okay. A little bit further. A little bit more. No, yeah. So the comprehensive plan and the public survey, there's been wide support for mixed-use vibrant location. And the comprehensive plan also really speaks to the fact that Garden City doesn't have that heart in either creating a park or a series of places and destinations for a park. And there is the potential that's growing now to there are bridges that are spanning the river now, so Boise side has a lot of activity, either planned or going on. And then from the hotel, the Casino Beach area, this potential, as you go down, potentially all the way to the fairgrounds, that, river area, I believe could become a heart, a series of little places, that could become a heart for the city. This seems to be well supported by the survey and those that we've heard back from, as well as it's supported by the comprehensive plan. But to do that, there are a lot of constraints. And so staff has noted in this, this plan has a target density of 50 units per acre. And that is to help the vibrancy be able to be something that is feasible. The site has a lot of constraints. There's not a lot of connectivity. There's not a high traffic road. There's not transit in the area. And so for any mixed use to be viable, there needs to be the support for that. And density is the one thing that the city can try to control. It is a net desire, so that doesn't preclude the townhomes to go adjacent to the current residents that are there. And then there would be a step back from the green belt that would be required. Here are some Google images that are kind of getting to that 50 unit per acre. You could do staffed townhomes, garden apartments, or multi-family apartments in one. Garden City has 3 locations currently that are achieving those densities. And the first of which is Copestone on 43rd Street or Adams, which is 45 units per acre. It's 4 stories. And then Crosshatch is actually 103 units per acre, also on Adams Street. And that's 6 stories. And then the Boardwalk Apartments on 41st Street is 58 units per acre. So with that, there's a discussion about a pedestrian sign. It's kind of a key point in this ordinance. And that is the idea of harnessing the energy from the river and trying to pull it into the city through a road that's focused on pedestrians. This ordinance is not dictating that there be a certain mix of use, but rather attempts to say allow for changeover. So focus the buildings towards that spine, and then it does require that there be fire sprinklers and the other thing that if there's more than 1 unit, ADA restrooms, and those tend to be the more expensive things that we see as staff when people want to renovate uses to be more to allow more people in them when they're non-residential. And so the hopes are, as that mixed use comes into play, there could be the ability to revamp those structures to allow for the mixed use and that vibrancy to be introduced over time. And so, show what that looks like. Here are some examples. You could have kind of that vibrant road feeling, either with or without a car. The first 2 examples are Park City, Utah, the main street. That's a little bit more car oriented than I think would be my ideal vision. But there's also Soy Rambutri in Bangkok, Thailand. I don't know how many people have actually been there. But then I don't think so. I've been there. It feels very tucked away and out of the bustle, very pedestrian oriented, but there is the ability to have vehicles go in there. And then Hannah is responsible for these great examples. One is a real one, Wine Alley in Woodinville, Washington. And then kind of that vision that staff was having of a fun activated space. Diagon Alley for Harry Potter is a good example. And so that's just kind of the vision in a nutshell. And then the structure, as the mayor had noted, option A was very prescriptive in nature. And the concern was this might miss market realities. It might not be flexible as those market realities change, and very bad intended consequences could occur because of that. The inability to construct the project or long-term vacancies. Option B was intended to be flexible, but maybe it was too flexible, where there weren't, the vision is stated, but there really wasn't any assurances to the public or to the developers or to the city that those expectations would be realized. And so this option C that's being presented to you for this work session is intending to find kind of that middle ground. There are still a lot of prescriptive standards, more so actually probably. And there, however, there are no sub-districts, and anything over 1 acre is required to have a master plan. And so that master plan allows for deviations to the base standards, provided that they achieve certain criteria. For example, parking is a good example, where development would need to meet the base parking standard or provide an analysis demonstrating that they need 85% of their peak parking through the study that they provide. With the master plan doing so much is great because it's flexible, it allows deviations for basically anything. However, it does open the door for negotiations, and it does both on both sides, for somebody trying to get a project done from the public or from staff, or the decision makers. And it relies heavily on staff and decision makers to understand and navigate the code and what alternatives would be appropriate to exact that vision. Talking about expectations. From a brief discussion about expectations, we've heard from some developers that there's a lot being requested in this this ordinance, anywhere from floodplain, addressing the floodplain, to public open space, to public roads, etc. And that makes of use without having direct access to something that would immediately address the non-residential side of things, such as a heavily traveled corridor. And so I just received feedback that maybe it's possible, but it's more like a 20 to 30 year time frame from this individual's perspective. And that's particularly because of the connectivity, the traffic, transit. So you really need that density. And reliance on other types of transportation. So lots of walking paths and bike paths, etc. to filter people around. Another expectation is that connection or lack of connection of Adams Street and what that might look like. And so right now that's a little bit nebulous, drafted nebulously, where if ACHD allows for it, it could be shut down. But it would be required to have emergency and bike pedestrian connectivity. We have heard from ACHD, and they indicated that they will make that determination at the time that there is development that's proposed. We've heard from Commissioner Brown. Hope that we can nail that down, because there's a lot of expectation that is on that.
Now, gentlemen, I talked about this it's the one issue I want to talk about a little bit, I'm like a suggestion. If you think now is the time, or we can wait, you do it later, or you want, is now a good time?
Certainly.
She knows what I'm gonna suggest. And, I'll have to bore you a little bit of history. When this was passed, when the waterfront district was passed, I was still working in the highway district. But I was the liaison regarding the city from the highway district and represented them at the meeting in 2005 when the city council approved development. And also, thank you very much for getting what I needed. I have the submission from the highway district they put in at that time. So let me follow that up. In the requirements for the waterfront district, it was a requirement that Adams Street be stubbed out within the district. And the purpose of it, there were two. First was North Ada Fire District. There's a requirement in the fire code that an area like the waterfront district with that houses have two emphasis for emergency fire trucks and other emergency stuff. The waterfront district, the way it is now, only has one, that's 36th Street. And so the fire district, they approved, they said that would fit there if it was stopped out, so that in the future, that would be a requirement. And that is recognized by Jen by the proposal. The second one was the highway district. And they pretty much wrote that they approved this. And here is the reasoning for the highway district. Currently, the only east-west, let's call it east-west collector in that part of the Garden City is Adams. And then Adams comes and turns. First of all, let me state it's a fact that very much of the traffic, now that the highway district is moving even more of the traffic on Adams Street, coming down Adams Street from Bedford, is capturing traffic. If you did a study on that, you would find a whole lot of the traffic is that. What it does is they avoid going to Chinman, come down Adams. Nowadays, they return right on 37, and so 37 is classified as collector. But 37 does not have a light at Chinman. So all that traffic is thinking about going into Boise. It cannot continue on 37. It's almost impossible certain times of the day to make a left from Chinman off. I dare anybody to do that. So what they do is they turn left on Clay, go to 36. So the highway district, like what they supported with us, you would have Adams as the collector. It would go straight on through and join on 36th Street, which is a collector. And 36th Street has a traffic light at Chinman. There's never going to be a traffic light at 37 because that would impede the movement of traffic way too much and violates all kinds of traffic engineering. So that was the reason why the highway district. So what we're proposing in this, and don't get me wrong, I supported it, is primarily it would be oriented. If I'll also even suggest that you might put bollards in to make it limited the pedestrians and bicycles. And that would eliminate all traffic. The other suggestion is maybe some kind of a mixed use road, which allows local traffic. But that is not what the highway district was thinking about at all, because they were thinking about how you get to that traffic signal with some Chinman. So, but if I understand what they told Jenna, they're not willing at the level that she went to talk to them to make any kind of commitment, really. What they said was, well, we'll wait, we'll see what develops there. I think that puts us in a really difficult position as the city. I'm trying to put this in because think about this, if we put in this thing, and I understand the people who are living there and what their problem with that. Turning that, what we want is more pedestrian and bicycling. So let's say that we put that in there like that. And then the highway district and the developer that actually develops that parcel. Because there's only one parcel in the end of the island right now. Over there. And one where there's one woman doing that parcel, it's not two. And more likely will be in single development. He comes in with the concept, oh, I don't know what we would do. And then where are we going to be if the highway district, if that one says no, we want that to be primarily, it's totally the opposite of what we're viewing. So this is my suggestion. I think that we should send under the mayor's signature a letter in which person probably would have to write this letter up to Jenna, and she and we can talk a lot, but something in the vein of going and look and emphasizing how important this is to the, as you said, Mr. Mayor, this next 100 years of development, this can go in there. And saying that we would request them to do some kind of consideration, give us something more than just the possibility of waiting for this to develop, the possibility of what could be done. And in that regard, I'm going to tell you about a specific incident that happened that supports the fact that they would, under their current rules, as far as I know, they haven't changed them, so it has to do with the law. But let me find the name of the street here. If you're familiar, the name of the street is very obvious. Priest Drive. If you're familiar with the Home Depot that's on Milwaukee, the street that there's a public street that is immediately to the south of Home Depot that comes off Milwaukee. That street used to go clear through that development that's behind Home Depot to Cole Road. But those people, it was a very similar kind of thing. When that Home Depot went in there, there was so much traffic and stuff that people were coming from Cole Road on that were going to Home Depot. The same kind of a situation where they were avoiding Fairview and the other two streets. They were coming down there, and it was really nuisance. So they wound up, they had a hearing. What can be done about this? And so what was done? In that case, they same rule. They wanted to have an emergency exit, so they put a gate up. But you cannot put a gate on a public street that's owned by ACSP. And so within that, in fact, I don't know whether it wasn't the highway district that did, they probably required Home Depot. Home Depot was required to buy a little piece of right that went across the street. It wasn't very wide, it was about 6 feet. And that's where they put the gate up. And I have no idea who owns that gate, whether it's Home Depot or the development behind it. But that was a requirement for them to do what we were sort of suggesting would happen if you put laws. In other words, I'm suggesting that that piece of street that we made being pedestrian and bicycle would probably not be able to be an ACHD street. It would have to be some kind of a private street owned by that development. I don't know, I can't sound out legal. I'm just telling you that's an example of what they did require. And I realize we're talking about the future. There are different people there right now. But bottom line is my suggestion that as we process before we go forward with this, it's exactly like what's written, that we try and get something more committed from the highway district saying that even if they can't definitively say what they should do, they should give us something more than just saying, well, wait, so they're saying, let's just wait.
I agree with that, Ken, and I think everybody can approve choice support of having that be a district biking example. I think it would, in my opinion, would be healthy to have a paper this year, so I think. Let's talk, when you get that from a good trip and we'll draft up the letter. My question then is, if draft up the letter with additional header with sign it versus just me. And so I think if we maybe do that, or sign up, easy commissioner as well as leadership, that might be a little bit more powerful. So I don't know. I will, we'll kind of take that angle and we'll draft something up and pass it around. Like we kind of dialogue on it, we can get it. Everybody we'll get everybody to sign that. And we get that out. So I think that's it. All right,
Thank you. Yeah.
That's the only big issue I have. What she did, I think it's did a great job.
I do want a couple of things that she said, just to clarify, you know, when she would, just to make sure we're on the same page. So I have gotten feedback from some people that are developing in Boise, where Boise's code was asked them to restrict it as a required land use. And they're like, we don't have the businesses. Right, so we're sitting at the counter or $40 square foot. And of course, you can see inside of that all this empty space. And so what Jenna was suggesting is that it could take 20-30 years for the density around that area to be at a point where then, yes, we can now support multi-use or 10 years. And so that's what she was mentioning, wanting to have them build the first level spaces to be able to accommodate that in the future. So they may make it housing, you know, for the first 10 years, but then as that density grows, and then say, hey, we now have an opportunity to put in some multi-use businesses, whether it's grocery store or whatever, they can easily convert that first floor to multi-use, but not requiring to have it be, it must be rented out, because you then prescribe and they do that. But the feedback that I got was like, maybe something that I felt. And we've kind of seen that cross section a little bit. And so we want to be able to allow the developers to fill that space any way we can now. And then over years, as the economy and all that, they'll figure out that these people are good. So they'll then convert it and make multi-use. And then I think the other thing is we need the density, because density then allows the multi-use to happen. If you don't have the density, then we're looking for businesses to survive well outside the city, come in and utilize that space, which then parking issues and all that. So the goal is to be able to have one per floor where the people who live there don't have to go anywhere. They can walk and they can ride their bikes and they can shop, and we don't have a food desert. That's what page when I talked about that. We have all the services that we can within the service quality city here outside. But they have that for people who might have one vehicle and to be able to have walk around, we have to have that level of distance. And so that's what we're looking to pursue. And maybe we will do that in 2026, which is let's go up to 2076, right? So just and then that also adds the sustained long-term financial support.
Thank you. Great. And then I wanted to point to these pictures where it's currently drafted. If there is required to be going back to the Adams connection, if there's a requirement that the road be connected, there are design things that you can do to make it feel like cut through traffic isn't allowed. The top is an AI generation. The Basque block in downtown Boise does have colored concrete. It fades over time. It's not near as vibrant as this idea. And then this is Bannock Street in front of the hospital. Rarely do I live next to that. Rarely do I see cars utilizing that. Occasionally you'll see the cars. Those who know that they can use it will use it. But that
I know.
Yeah, I did not know that.
I know.
but to Commissioner Brown's point, it's all contingent upon what ACHD would or wouldn't allow. And Adams Street is a collector, and I highly doubt they would allow this kind of design on a collector. And so that, not that you couldn't design it to make it uncomfortable for cut through traffic, but would it meet the policies is another question.
And.
And Commissioner Brown,
This has an impact on what we in the letter.
Mhm.
You could leave. That could be. And you could, and then ACHD has the power to end before where it now ends. And if you had some kind of a thing where you converted that into a different, that wouldn't have to be classified as a collector.
Okay.
For example, the road I just told you about over there, where they put a gate in. ACHD still owns the 2 minutes of the road. They still take care of that road, up to the, as far as I know. And so and the piece of ACHD, Adams that is inside the wildfire district already. I don't think that's not considered a collector. It would now be, it could be just get a little street. And then the collector would stay pretty much what they now have. In other words, the collector would stay on 37. They probably should designate Clay, not a little street. And it will influence what happens to Clay, of course, if you're going to leave. If we get what we're wanting to do, the collector will always stay Adams, 37th, Clay, then 36th, which isn't Clay. So that we can word it some kind of a way. I don't think, I interrupted it, but I don't think if we did something like this, like the bottom, that part of the
yeah, I was just gonna say, I was looking at this piece of property on Preece that you described. And I'm familiar with that because my son lives right there. And the north half of Preece, where the gate is owned by the Fraser Place Community HOA. So that's the neighborhood. And the south part is privately owned by Schroeder Mark Trust, dated 2010, which I bet is real close to when Home Depot built there. So yeah, so it was a public-private partnership to buy that.
Yeah, they did that. I don't know. I said that they had people buy it.
Could be, but it's not owned by Home Depot. So.
I like that idea.
And then just one last kind of note before I turn it over to you with questions. Burdens have been noted, that there are burdens that are pretty high, particularly for the property that's adjacent to the river. There's a request for public open space, parking, streets, and flood protection. And so that's a pretty high bar for the city to be requesting to exact. In thinking through that, there are maybe things that address the floodplain that are in the works. The city has started the process to enter into a process of looking at a letter of map revision, which may significantly shrink the floodplain. But another thought that I had, there might be tools available where once the urban renewal agency or once the urban renewal district sunsets, another small urban renewal district could be initiated, and that district then could pay back the flood protection, potentially open space and street improvements through that district. And then once it's paid back, that could sunset. So there may be ways to offset those pretty high burdens. And with that, I will turn it over to you. Thank you for listening to me ramble on. But I guess the biggest question is the vision appropriate? And then secondary to that, do you like the structure or draft C? Or would you prefer to pivot? And then in general, are there any major issues with the ability to enact this? Are there any things that may not be feasible that you see with it? And I thank you very much. Once we receive feedback, I'll incorporate or will incorporate your discussions and continue with targeted outreach for those that might be using it. I think that's really important. And refine the structure.
Jen, I can clarify some, when you said burdens. The part property that is adjacent to the green belt, are we demanding that be open space, or we say we really don't want that? Because we want a waterfront district that's like San Antonio West, Pine Bush from my vision. We don't have it downtown, so really, unless the fairgrounds. So really, what I would envision is like a waterfront district that goes down from the boardwalk, close to the fairgrounds, all the way down to the Louis's. It's like boardwalk-ish, and it's all this kind of things. So they would be, that's kind of the money. Okay, so we not restrict their ability to do that.
Mayor, this version does not restrict. What it does is it's a smaller footprint, lower height, and then kind of a 60% kind of permeable area around it. But the setbacks are only 5 feet more than what would otherwise be required.
Maybe. Okay.
No, you're good. So just a little bit of background on where the commission is, because the commission has spent some time with this. Last month, we didn't go through A and B. We haven't discussed C. And so part of the reason I believe we're here today is that discussion, because we're talking about codes, and there's a lot to them, legally and then practically, if you the actual on the ground nature. And so when we started looking at these individually, I have hundreds of comments to each one. And it became apparent that we could either go through each one individually and spend dozens of hours talking about code, or we could work here to really identify how does group, we know that we can't love it, right? Today, but how do we really move with it? Because each set of options, all three of them, are completely different. And so when we're talking about prescriptive one A, more of a general one B, and then some of a hybrid on C, it's completely different. So we could spend weeks, months talking about these different codes, because each one specifically has language inside of it that has detrimental effects or benefits, right? Height versus setbacks. We're hearing all sorts of different things from the public, which we could then take, but then is going to come to you ultimately to decide. And if we go through A and you want C, then does it really make sense? So I think from my perspective, and I don't know if we can get here today, what process would we go through to get to actual code that we want to look at? And then if it is A, B, or C, then do we dig into that at some point after you said, let's work on C, for example, and then get it in the code? Because if you turn it back into A and you spend all this time on C, does it really make sense? So I had a question really on process, and then we got a bunch of questions on code. Got into a little bit today. I think we could talk about that all day long, because I have different opinion about altogether. Future flexibility, like if we really are trying to work this into a master planning situation, we're not going to be the ones to figure out what's going on the ground. It's going to be the developer who buys it. And then they're going to do their own feasibility analysis of traffic studies, their own access studies. They're going to say, is this the place to build $100 million development or not? Right? And if it doesn't pencil, then it's going to sit there. Or they're going to subdivide it and do what they can to spin it out to make money. Unless we get some probable billionaire that wants to come in and donate it, it's probably going to be looked at any other business mode, which is dollars and cents. So it does have to make sense feasibly, which means that the code has to allow for the highest and best use to exist there, which is going to be driven by density, cost, many factors that we may think we have, but we probably don't know specifically. And that's why Jen and I talked about, having different developers that do this type of scale project, look at it to really dig into the code and say, does this work or not? And if it's in 20 to 30 years, then are we good with having that parcel sit there vacant for 20 to 30 years or not? And so what do we do there? And I think that everybody has great ideas, but ultimately the one who buys it, is gonna put the money into the ground, is the one that's actually gonna have the idea. We're gonna hear tons of concerns from the public that are going to affect what happens. Density, height, access. I think that we like to talk about access in atoms, but we want 50 units per acre, talking about a crazy amount of population. And if you're talking about only right-in or outs on Shindig, how are you going to manage that with these larger developments? Right, so just think about if we're looking at having that type of density, we need to be able to control the access, or else you're going to have people wanting to go back. But then we also have to have the consideration for the commercial. And so if you're not going to have people there, you can't have people getting there, we'll make this for commercial. And I think that we've talked about the spine, but we also talked about board block. Today, the code exists with the amount of population that we plan to either have living there or we're planning on bringing. Because we're landlocked to the north. So everybody's either coming in to the west, from the west, right? Because you can't get in from the east, they're coming up from the south. So you're really kind of having a pinch point there. When you think about just different areas in the valley, you'll see the type of park that we're talking about, Hyde Park, for example. So it's a corridor, but you have access all the way throughout, and it's still less. So I think thinking through is the right way to look at it so that you can have the access. And if you really want to have that as a commercial corridor, or more of a public facing corridor, then this needs to make sense practically with access and so forth. And then getting into the actual code itself, I think is going to be a process. So we had some guidance on how we would benefit from looking at this and then identifying which way to go would really help us get into the code. Very good proposal for your research.
I think in my mind, it's like, where are we at with the options, right? So I'd be interested in, I'm kind of an option C guy, because I want flexibility, and that gives you the most opportunity for the city, for the sustainability and vitality of that. And, I don't think, personally, I don't think someone's going to be, we say 20, 30 years, it's not going to be developed in 20 or 30 years, it's not going to sit flat. It's more that it probably won't reach its full, it may not reach its full potential of full multi-use, type, like I said, where the bottom floor gets converted to that type of, for multiple use, so density, whatever converts. I think whoever's going to always start the development process for them. Because it's one, it's an evaluable piece of property, two, one of the accomplishments, right? So I think for me, it's more the 20, 30 comments about for we have kind of a true multi-use environment of that might look like. So and I don't want to speak for each other. I think to give her direction is like, are people stuck on A, we'd be super prescriptive, we tell them what to do, or you're kind of on. Then we came up with the C based on feedback that we've gotten, where we want to go. So I guess part of the session is we can all kind of agree on which option we like to pursue. Then we can kind of focus on C and then dive into what you're talking about. But I think the point is let's limit the options so we can focus on one of them and then put our attention to that. And then I feel some relief question about what that. That's just my 2 cents on that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I might suggest that that we could give our opinions, but eliminating options in this setting would constitute a decision, which is something we probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. The opinions would be helpful. And then staff can interpret what those opinions are and kind of move forward with an option and start doing some of the refinement, looking for redundancies, making sure to kind of look for some legal issues, et cetera, structuring it so it reads better. I know right now it might need some restructuring. But if that discussion of if everybody kind of has a thumbs up, thumbs down on their personal preferences, that might give staff enough to run with an idea. So,
We're having a public hearing on this.
I believe it July. Mhm.
So we'll see. After this, we did it's back to the public hearing next month.
Mhm.
And the recommendation on, yeah.
Yeah, so I can say, I think that the endpoint should be issued.
Yes, for my opinion.
I'm asking for everybody's opinion if you want to be on to start.
Well, I've said this before in public meetings, I'm a fan of, limited government and letting the market, dictate what's sustainable there, what's desired there. I'm not a fan of controversial, but here it is. I'm not a fan of limits, height limits, prescriptive mixed use. I think mixed use is great, but there has to be an appetite for it that the market can sustain, or we're setting up places for businesses to fail when perhaps a better use would be housing or some other use. So I definitely lean more toward letting the market dictate. In a situation where there's a large parcel of land that an investor might buy and develop, that's the market. That's the market participant is the developer, he or she, or the team that buys that. And of course, they bring drafts to planning and zoning and to council. But it's my hope that as government, we enable the market to thrive and be vibrant, rather than throw a book of rules at them that they must comply with. Maybe the rules make sense, maybe they don't, but the market, supply, demand, all of that is always going to make sense. That's a maxim of the marketplace. That's my opinion.
And can I ask follow-up questions on that? Some of the items, the kind of the vision, like the idea of the pedestrian sign being required to be constructed to allow for changeover to having sprinklers and addressing the sign and having that to hopefully get to a mixed use someday. Is that overly prescriptive in your opinion, or is that along the lines of that okay to set that level? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Yes. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
So, I think I came a little more toward the hybrid approach. I did actually see, spent most of my time actually looking to see, because I did believe that A was more prescriptive than even I become poet. And I think, when I think about what are the things that are important, what I see, it really I think height is a real sensitive, issue, because I think about, I don't really want the area along the green belt to really look like downtown Boise. I'd like for it to be maybe a hybrid of, if we want it to be urban influence for sure, but that having an 18 stories. First of all, I don't even know how we can leave people like that of the area, because for exactly the thing that Commissioner Montoya mentioned, how can we get people in and out of the area in a safe way? Because there are only limited ways to get up. The river is the river. You can't go that direction. But I I feel like we're Garden City. I hear a lot of people who live here and talk a lot about who want to try to keep the garden in Garden City. I think that the recommendation of the 6 to possibly even 8 stories is a feels like sort of comfortable maximum height level, but in terms of how that gets achieved, I mean, I don't have particular concern about that, with the exception of the buffer zone between the existing waterfront district and moving in as you move west from that district, that there'd be something that provides that neighborhood some sense of comfort, what they think that could potentially look like and be. I've always been in the mindset that I think light to light is sort of a nice and comfortable thing, particularly, or only a step up with what maybe the next more challenging thing could be. So if the zoning is typically only a 2-story type of zone, you know, you can put something that can go up to 3 stories next to it, but then really when you make a chunk, it goes extremely, you go from say a 3-story to a 6-story, that begins to create a sense of imbalance. And you know, I'm a huge advocate that we need to be at least providing some guidance, at least as a buffer zone for those existing majority 3-story townhouses. So alike to alike can certainly be, I think, acceptable. It's acceptable. I looked at the zoning because with that existing waterfront district being a mixed use. I mean, it already has no density limit and it has 72-foot height requirement. So even the allowed density within where the waterfront district was built is actually more expensive than what has actually been built out for the most part. So I think that those are the things that I do think a lot about how we can get people in now there. And a density of 50 units an acre, we're looking at about 1,700 units that could potentially be there, where you're going to get people in and out, especially if we try to pay for $50 million add-ons. And I mean, my heart definitely goes to, I would like to try to see about trying to provide some protection on add-ons as well, but also the bigger question is how are we going to get people in and out of that area? And I think it's a very significant and very difficult question that I think we have to grapple with, and I think ACHD would grapple with as well.
So Jen and I have had conversations on A and B already. It seems like there's a lot of what we talked about in C. And so I do like how C is evolving. And but I do hear what as President Page is saying about allowing there to be a market for it in a way that's not too prescriptive to limit the ability to develop in that area. So if there was a way to add flexibility where if there's a plan that, for example, doesn't necessarily show that pedestrian corridor, but it has something that is attractive, does engage the public and activate the corridor, then maybe it works. And so we allowing the flexibility for the developer to be able to vet and design would help. And then over the next month, I'll get into the code and see and set up something have to do actually that's really happens. But I like where she's going. A lot of where that is. I don't know if necessarily the data to go into actually the code issues itself right now, but yeah, we can talk about that. We'll actually get into see. Thank you.
So I think this conversation has been very interesting. First of all, thank you, Jenna, for coming up with the 3 options for us to consider. Before I read C, or I should say after I read C, I'm just leaning towards preferring X. I think when we get too prescriptive, we end up getting ABC anyway. Right? So I really like B at first, that I like to see, because I thought, you know, it does make sense to consider the specific uses, you know, really do as the city, I think, want to control. You know, the fact that uses go into parcels such as this, or such as. But hearing the conversation now, I've kind of gone back to E. Because I've gone back to the idea that this piece of dirt in our city is so crucial to the future of Garden City. And to get something that's a really unique, a great placemaking opportunity, B could provide. I think it's really crucial for somebody to come in and say, with some great vision, and have not complete flexibility, but a lot of flexibility to build something that would be completely unique and really create an environment that would drive that whole section of the city going forward. Waterfront really is carried water on that so far, but I think this one could just be an amazing addition to that part of the city. From a vibrancy standpoint, from a placemaking standpoint, from even, you know, I have questions about open space too. You know, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, 25% of the space or whatever city which you see, and maybe it's the stupid again. That seemed like a lot to me. But we do have a river there, and just think maybe that is the right. And again, that's somebody that's an expert at this stuff. Take that, maybe that piece of component, because I do think open space on parcel of space is really important. As far as getting people in and out, I confess, I didn't consider that at all, but as I've sat here listening to the comments, and thank you for the comments on that. This is the thing to bring up. It made me think of something I do have a lot, but that's parking. I don't like parking. I think a handful of people in this room already think. I don't think it's right for government to say, hey, property owner, you gotta give up part of your parcel so people can store their cars there. I don't think that should be replaceable, in my opinion. It doesn't mean park is not to be built. It would get built. But I think the developer will be able to say, hey, here's how you do this. And there will be people that will have cars, certainly. But I think a blanket parking requirement is just something, especially in a densifying city where we're infilling, and that's the only opportunity we have in our city is infill. I think having minimum parking is just not the right approach in this situation. And that ties to the comment, I think, getting people in and out to reduce congestion, I think, or to help reduce congestion. One of the things we can do is, I think, allow the developer to say, hey, this is proximity to everything else that Boise has to offer, the river, downtown Boise, the new CWI thing that's being built just across the river. There probably wouldn't be, and again, some kind of study could be done, I'm sure, by a developer. Again, I'm not an expert on all this stuff, but would it identify the fact that, you know, there won't be the amount of car traffic that would be, say, in a lot of other parts of the city, or even Boise, I think there will be a lot of people, one cars or less, or just bikes, or being able to walk to and from where they get to. So certainly there will be more cars on Adams 37. But I think, if we were to take that requirement out of it, I think it would contribute to the idea of being able to have less congestion. So I will lean, I'm leaning back more towards B, which is the least restrictive with the caveat of having a specific shop.
Like you,
Yeah. So be prescriptive with regard to use.
I support Josh Steve. Because I like the hybrid, baseline standards, flexibility. I really appreciate all the work I did with Stevie efforts, so to have these additional options to go at. I know you, I know it's a lot of time in this, and when I read it, I thought it appears really thoughtfully that legal flexibility and capability. And you know, I like what you guys are saying about the market conditions and not having the government be too like overbearing and conservative. I also like the idea that the neighboring people that live around have some degree of like certainty of what's going on. Some of the things that I've been thinking about is, I mean, there's definitely like height is definitely an issue. I don't want to see a huge building right next to the river. But I do think that the area is really density to sustain the city through time and also to go out on the how. And I'm thinking as we move forward, years, really not want to have to over funding, not like, going out. So I don't know, it's possible that you guys know if engineers can build buildings that you can like start small and then later as we need as we come in. And I don't know if that's the more thing because you want to make how construction is going to be done on top of working in the living. It's just going to be I mean, I don't even know if it's possible. Like, if you need to have a foundation set, it's just too expensive. 6 stories now. But it's just an idea I have. So I think that draft speed appears to preserve like the strong community vision, which I would love to like as with like reading it as well as like visioning the aspects and the pedestrians. Boardwalk mission, which is like one thing I love about Boise is just park all down the river, and it would be so beautiful to have that in our city too, where it's like a whole green belt going down to the fairgrounds. It's just like this beautiful vibrant place, that people come to. When I was down in Boardwalk on Saturday night, it was so busy and there's so many lights out there. I didn't get the sense that it was like traffic was the issue getting to that area. And the other traffic coming off of Adams Street. I mean, I don't know if it's possible, but like, because I actually take that route every day to work, right? I go down Adams, go on 37, and then do that, go on Clay 36. And the buildings, at least now, are industrial on Clay Street. So when you go by storage facility, some yard ends with a little flat there, but it's an industrial yard. And like, to me, that feels better than how car traffic diverted that way than to go and divert it to the left. Because when you go down Adams, the opening to Adams on the water temperature area, like you have to go over still. I mean, if I get curved way, they would turn it, but make the road. But if cars were to go that way, it just wouldn't make sense to me because you get over there and it's like very residential or just small and just full outs. And so that's the traffic calming things. I mean, I don't know how like ACHU would feel about it or like just keeping it as it is right now. If Clay Street way to divert traffic.
I think that's the point of the again.
Oh, that's right. We get some traffic commitment. I will come ahead. if we did wind up doing like what we're talking about, then the exit out for the waterfront will continue to be 36th Street. Okay. And the exit, they're only, this whole area, when you're talking about it, there's only one exit on the west that works, and that is Adams Street. That's going to continue to collector. And but that it will continue to be like what it is. The other ways to the south, the only exits out of this section we're talking about are 38th Street and 37th Street. There's some wording in there about 38. They would have just, they'll have to continue to function like they do. And then 37, and then what that will result in is at some point when clay redevelops, then that will continue to that, and they'll exact some widening will help them. The highway district is going to exact probably a wider right of way there as part of the process that we go through. So, what is going to address your Wendy's question about it, the highway district will just have to deal with those in the access. And when they do their plan, how to prove this, they're going to do that. That's not one. And I don't think we want to put something in here that would take away from the concept that we're going to need to try to put more emphasis on the best things of bicycles by taking away that, what you have to do if you're going to make some other kind of order. All I'm saying is I think it's always pretty good to leave like it is and see what it tells us. Then I'll talk a little bit more about that very issue here.
Yeah, do you have anything else like that? Continue about?
I think that kind of maybe, I mean, I have a lot on those, but if we're gonna still talk about like the get down into nitty gritty later, then I can.
I think we're just trying to get an overview before people kind of each like they can chat and idea about draft.
Originally, when we first did that, I was with where Kent was, I was in favor of option B. And after I looked at it, just to put it right in front, I think we I think we should pursue option C as more of a compromise, because I think it addresses the issue of way too much restriction that was in A of what to do, right? And at the same time, I think we want to do not as much freedom, if you will, as is in D. And so I think Senate took care of that in option C. When you look at this development, and I'm assuming the biggest parcel that's involved in this area is what's in ACHDs. The other piece, the second biggest single parcel is the one where this connection is going to go through. All the others, I'm not sure what they're doing, but and so she has to be scribed in there to give the freedom that you guys are talking about for a developer, because it's written in option C that this, what the prescriptive part of this is in there, can be done away with a plan, with a document that will, for that particular section is being developed, right? It says, and then you can have
Deviations. Is that word?
what's it called?
Deviations from the base standard.
Yeah, exactly. But you have a time for that particular thing to deviate from that, and that is an opportunity, especially for the single biggest parcel that's then come in and deviate from the specifics of that. So it provides for that piece, right? And with regard, and so that provides that, there are still, a couple things that I know that this has started. The question about the elevations, I agree, you don't want the 8-story roofs right up against the green belt. But I'm very much in favor of the fact that in Garden City, especially, we're constrained, and our development is got to be up. And it's got to be, it's the only way we can solve this traffic problem. For example, I have a real controversy with some of my neighbors talking to them because I was instrumental in putting together the State Street plan, which we've been working on since 2004. And the State Street plan will not work for that park if we don't get very much higher density. And that order is that the State Street plan for not to become a parking lot is all dependent on mass transit. Bus rapid transit is what is buildable. And that's what's going to happen to what we got with that year across the years talking about. Until you get some more density and then on that, we're not going to develop transit that's going to help get rid of some of these cars that you're talking. So I'm in favor, and 8 stories, I think it's not fine. Don't if you want to land up against the river. When we had our hearing here, you had some people that live over in the waterfront district who happen to live on the little spine that goes out there that they're right on Greenville, which is where they chose to build 2-story houses. However, waterfront district, though, light limitation was 55 feet. And on that street, right, that takes off on that street, those townhouses that are over there, that are just a block away from the people who are requesting that we limit. So we limit in those areas over there to 2 stories. They're 3-story townhouses, and they have, I think, even have a book they don't talk. So, what I'm saying is, I think we should have something about some business there right on this thing, but we should be able to step up and get the, otherwise you're not going to get this thing. So that's my thoughts on this issue.
Good, thank you.
And so yes, there are going to be a lot of people that are coming in that but they're living everywhere. It's but sort of decision that the developer made to go west. He could have put a bottle along the green belt. He went totally within the there but he stole it. But so
Thank you. I got to change a little bit of that by saying some of these because the feedback's been fantastic. So I too kind of I like the market. I think it really what people are to spend on $1 million. You know, kind of understand how to develop the property kind of can't plan James's point. You know, so I think giving them some free rank, you know, they could have to, you know, come to the city what they want to do. I also agree with Wendy in terms of that buffer, you know, right next. It's not going to say mine, it's not going to 2 stories, but it's going to be tall. I don't think people stories or 6 stories. And they graduated with that just is good practice. In terms of requiring, you know, spine, things like that, I think to Ryan's point, it could be where anyone that can buy, you got to get the same effect. We do want some type of access to the green. And then I think one thing I'm not quite sure about Dennis mandating that their first story have to have sprinklers and have to have this and that. I think, you know, these people know what's going to have to be developed there in the future. And I think if they plan ahead, that kind of the free market point that James pointed was they'll do it, or they'll just spend the money at the time to let them put it later. But I don't know if that is something we want to mandate. Also, with the sprinklers at the first floor, I don't know if we want to prescribe that. I think that ADAC limits what they want to put in there. They may not want to have some, if they want to have a spread around or something, we can somewhere. At the same, we want to explore that. I think those market companies that think that, because I think, you know, you know, these developers who do these great developments, say, they're kind of long-term vision, they don't necessarily get people to try to build it, flip it right away. They don't take that into account, and those are questions that we be able to ask. P and Z, and then, it's like, look, our goal is to look at this as a 100-year development, right? On density in the city, we want, what I want to do is attract people in Garden City that want to come to Garden City, live in Garden City, shop in Garden City. If they have a car, they're only going to work and back, and they can stay in the city. That, if you want the white picket fence and then 2 dogs on the yard and all that, then you can live on the north side of the earth, or you can live west of Glenwood, where you want to go, where you want to bring in, where you want to start. But this core, the Glenwood really is kind of an urban core. I think consequently, if we build the density, you're going to attract people that want to live there. They actually reduce the traffic, right? Because the people are going to come. My goal, we visual views, they leave the front of the car, and then they walk, shop, do whatever they want. So that's a couple of things.
Can I just add to that really quickly, if it's okay? I think allowing the use of retail, which of course we will, that is what we need to do, because I think to your point, the density has got to come first, I think.
I think that should support the business, and I agree. I think we can put a lot of effort into what the tables can be. And so, from that perspective, that would become a restriction. That I would can't. I'm not sure to make sure we want the use table to be for that and multi-use. We don't want to light industrial. This is an example, right? We want places where we really the use table is like, what are all the uses right around the city to get everything going on done? That's kind of use table way in my vision. So I think we would focus really on what are all the uses. We got a basic use table already. We just have to kind of decide which ones we want. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, do we have a chance to hear from Mr. Bickerton?
Yes, so you're next, but we got
Well, before, I didn't have anybody online. We don't have anybody online. So are either one of you interested on the regularly scheduled planning and zoning commission meeting? Or are you more interested in this discussion?
She's talking about the public.
I was going to wait to hear the discussion.
Okay.
I've been out of town 3 months, but missed pretty much everything. It's had more estimates and comments. I would say it's pretty difficult to know what's going on because I'm not getting some updates about Plan B or Plan C. The only way I find out about that is getting online and seeing this there.
So there hadn't been an update on Plan C. That was intended for this work session before it was pushed out to the public. Dependent on this discussion, it may change before it's not that it's hidden, but before it was no.
But your direct question, I'm not here for the best.
Thank you, and I'm assuming the same.
Do we have access to packets that you all refer to?
Yes, they're online. They are online. And with that being said, I think you have more time to deal with this.
Well, so for those who don't know me, I am very new to housing planning authority. 2 months in, and my interest came because I was a resident. He's just lived through 2 years of uncertainty with development happening in my backyard. So I do have a very visceral reaction to allowing existing residents certainty of what's happening in their backyard. So it's been really interesting hearing the different views, and whilst I 100% agree that government should not be destroyed in the future, and you also think you have to recognise the existing neighbours and then uncertainty to what's going to happen. And I would say that if you ask about the developer that's developing plantation and river club, he would also tell you that he would like some certainty, he probably would have liked some certainty, rather than spending money on legal fees, rights, neighbours believe were rights, and what he thought he could come in and develop. So I am very in favour of option C, where there is
some certainty of what happens in that development, and then there's flexibility based on what the developer, can recommend. I do think that we're looking for a unicorn developer, we're looking for a developer that is invested in being part of the legacy of Garden City. And I think that's the developer we want to attract, not the developer that just wants to make money. And so I think that we want a developer to work with us and with the Garden City and the one get over Garden City. And I think the way to do that is by showing our code that ensures that they develop what we want versus what's fiscally responsible. So maybe this is naive, but I would sell to developers the so-called burdens as certainty. Like this is what we want from this developed area. So that's why I like C, because it gives some certainty, it explains where there's flexibility, there's not much conversation around that flexibility. I really appreciate that we're seeking private input and the developers' reaction, and encourage you to continue those conversations as we go down to what route it is, to see if what we're trying to, so we're down in a idealized script that this is what we see this area as, and then it looks like downtown Portland right now with density buildings and graffiti, because, they don't get mixed use in there anymore, and, so I do like the idea of there being some sort of flexibility, at least I'm repeating myself. I did have a visceral reaction, I will say, about parking. Because if we're looking to the future, and I've lived in London, I've lived in the countryside, I've lived in London, I've lived in New York, I've lived in LA, I've worked in places like Traverse City, Michigan, a long time in Portland, so I've seen small cities that work well, big cities that don't work well. I literally haven't lived in Dying Valley, but I've lived in Richmond, which the watch Ted Lasso is exactly what Dying Valley is based on. It's cold streets, the cars can go down, but don't go down because they're very narrow, but they have restaurants and shops. But I think the reality is, if we look to the future, we'll never get rid of cars in this area because people come here to recreate as well. My boat space is 16 miles away, and God bless anyone's plans for public transport. I don't see there being public transport up to this in the near future, even in 50 years. So people can live here, even if they're walking down now, working in the city. We have to allow people to have cars. We have realistic that people have cars. And so I agree, it's not, you have to, everyone has the 2 cars per house, but I think you do have the people that stay expecting. That's my, and then I have to say, I do like Christian Shepherd's idea of over engineering for vertical expansion. I don't know if that's another one, and I don't know if that's possible within the floodplain, so there was sort of technical questions. And then my other piece of that is like, I really am appreciative of not getting your bonuses, like you can get more flexibility on the development if you offset more public access or more public interest. It feels to me like we can just treat this as we have to follow code, but we also have to have a continual conversation with the Garden City residents, with the developer, and us. That feels like the right.
Rich, may I ask a question? What would you think of like what would call an offset or a trade-off, I guess, like if someone said, we'll put in a small parking, might be 3 or 4 or in exchange for, would you be in favor of that rather than having like parking spaces of, a formula? Because I think what we require of that parking study, and I agree, cars aren't, I think the number of cars people may have will go down. I know that when I get to the point of having that, I'm going to get 2 cars. But what do you think about allowing for that type of trade-off? If you put a garage or something that that fits in the neighborhood on the Hansel, that you trade off of that, would that be something to be open to?
Yes, because I agree that's with any of the bonuses, like if I do this, then this offsets it. And accessibility of the free and people, yes, it'd be great to feel in American. I don't see it, but I, yeah, we go, we can't do that.
I just wanted to see if that specific example would be good.
And for the right, that is, two, I'm not the inside car, I have two cars for Brian. So my point is that if you build a place that has scarce parking because the developer said it's not built parking, then if I'm looking to buy it and I have two cars and I want to live there, I'm like, well, they didn't build parking, which somehow it's not enough people. I gotta keep living where I'm at, so, but there are people out there that, have a car, or no cars, especially in this type of area, we work banned for this kind of thing, so. I agree, and I apologize for my also this will. But I agree, because I have two cars that live in a single family home too. But I'm trying to, what I think my philosophical point on that is to create more affordable housing. Because now we're not building as much parking. And more variety of housing too. I think allowing developers flexibility in parking question gives us variety, which is part of our comprehensive plan, gives us more affordable choices, which is part of our comprehensive too. So that's wrong. But I agree, cars are not. They're not.
And that's another. And I certainly agree, again, I'm thinking of the examples from Europe, that's just say the development came in and said, hey, you know, I'll put in the 5, elements of the lines to use their plots. I'll put in space with 5 electric cars, recharge that available to anyone who lives there, and you rent a car. That could be where I'm saying we should encourage that creativity in the conversation. So still have restriction, but have that creativity.
We have had one development propose that.
To tell a quick story. Okay. So once upon a time, a developer proposed an 18-story hotel on the river at 41st Street. And everybody's head exploded. News stories, articles in the paper. It was crazy. It got approved. And when that developer went to investment partners, somebody made the determination that the marketplace would not support that. So that idea morphed into apartments that are 5 stories tall, that have an underground parking that's below surface, that fills with water because it's next to the river, that has an active sump pump that pumps out into the river all the time, with dedicated infrastructure for line bikes and line scooters, and a surface parking lot, which I will bet you in 100 years will not be a surface parking lot. That's an example of the marketplace. And it's, I think, arguably the most vibrant place in Garden City at this moment.
Mr. Mayor?
She's the boss.
Yes.
I want to build on your comment on something that we should perhaps, assuming that we're going to proceed with us and see that your example of doing away with the sprinklers, that requirement in there, and you remember that we might want to use the same vein if others agree in the prohibition against the residents on the first floor, I think. Over there along the window. I think that should be a similar kind of thing. Maybe not that's our goal eventually, but if a developer comes in and they must have put something in there that is essentially housing for now, with the possibility of the being on the ground floor, but eventually maybe being business or something like that. I'm not so sure that the company stay how the way we've written it in right now. Of course, it can be covered by a master plan too, right? That could be eliminated, but maybe it doesn't need to be addressed.
Thank you. I think this is great. Just, I realized that last Friday, everybody received 300 plus pages to digest by today. But I did want to know on the parking, as the discussion, I think the city's had a lot. The staff did put in there that for residential parking, it does not have to be on site. It could be on site and not covered. I don't know if that starts going towards maybe structured parking off site that could address more. I suspect we'll have plenty more conversations on parking as we go through this.
But then it does also say though that it's sort of stated, I thought there was something in the note that talks about. I thought I read something that it may not necessarily be on site, meaning you build one unit, you have to have one parking space. But I thought there's something in it in terms of containing it within the development itself and not spilling out beyond.
Yes, there is a finding that it doesn't affect the general neighborhood, and so it would need to be parked.
It has to be able to handle its own parking.
Yes.
It's kind of like drainage, you expect parking to go on drainage there and figure out what the things are going to mean and inconvenience everything beyond those boundaries.
The intent is that it is drafted that way, you're correct, that the parking just isn't not considered, which may be an option as we go through this, but the way that it's drafted, it's intended that they address their parking needs still, but it does not have to be within the unit.
I have a couple of questions if that would be okay.
Absolutely.
So I have a question about this master plan, because obviously you have the ACHD property tax is the largest parcel within this. And you have some things to address that, but then you have that other larger parcel to the south, which is adjacent to the waterfront district. And you have some smaller parcels kind of to the west and south, I guess. The smaller parcels, I guess I question how a master plan works in a situation when the entire piece of property is not owned by the same property owner. Because that was the only thing that I was trying to conceptualize, how could that work? I mean, it works when you have a piece of property that's pretty good size. You can actually use flexibility and come up with something a little bit more creative. But how can, are we requiring, I think you said about acre or more, we would require a master plan?